Availability is as was last week. Everybody's come through the week okay. Henry's on the grass now, or on the turf now. So hopefully we'll be seeing him back training with us soon.
Is there a definitive timetable, or is it just kind of how he responds?
I think he'll be probably fit for selection after the international break. So probably out for the next 3 home games.
Just being back at home, being back in the stadium, is that kind of almost like something just like the doctor ordered just because of the way the first 2 weeks have gone?
It's a change of scenery for us, which is good. I mean, you know, as good as our training ground is, it's always nice to come back to the stadium and do a bit of training. Turf's been replaced as it normally is after every couple of years, and lads have trained on it today, trained well. We'll train on it tomorrow and get ready, you know, for the game. And you know, historically we've played very, very well at home with our fans behind us, and that's what we're after again this weekend.
Do you feel like there's a book out on you guys in terms of how to have success against your back line?
I don't think there's a book out, no.
Figure.
I know, I do get that, but no, I mean, we know that we haven't dealt with counter-attacks very well over the first two games, and that's something that we have to be better at, and something we've worked on, you know, first week and now second week.
Danielle?
5 straight at home is a long time. What can you guys kind of take from this stretch of being able to not travel, sleep at home, all those types of things where you can really kind of get the ball rolling on your year?
Yeah, I mean, I love home comforts, but I don't like the fixture list, if that makes sense. I like being at home and playing the home games because, you know, as I said earlier, we're strong here. People come and know they're going to have a tough game when they come and play us here. But for me, the fixture list needs to be looked at a little bit more. You know, 2 home, 2 away, or 1 home, 1 away. I think that's just a fairer way for the whole league to flourish a little bit more. You know, I think we went 9 out of 11 games last season away from home, and that's a tough gig for anyone. I think, you know, a head coach lost his job last season, and they played seven games away from home to start the season. You know, that's, for me, that's not acceptable. But, you know, we have to plan with what we've got, and yeah, we've only got 1 point out of the 2 games on the road, and we need to make sure, you know, the next 5 games that we get a lot of points at home.
Mike?
Is there a sense of frustration with the guys right now, anxiety, because as you mentioned, just 1 point out of possible 6 in the first 2?
Not frustration, probably a little bit of a disappointment. I don't think we've played anywhere near our levels that we can, but that individually, you know, and I've said that to the players. If I look at the 2 games, you know, with the exception of the first game where I'd probably have give Cali an 8 out of 10, I don't think anybody else has got over a 6, you know, and if you don't get, you know, more than a 6 out of 10, you're not going to win games at any level. So, you know, that's the thing that I've spoke to the players about. You know, we need to up our levels individually, and then, you know, we can be a collection. And
How much do you, I mean, you mentioned you just talked to the players, but is this a situation where your leadership group kind of internally talks to guys and tries to uplift and motivate and say, look, it's early, we got lots of time, let's just get on it?
yeah, we've got some really good seniors within the squad. You know, none more so than the captain, Ashley Westwood, who takes on a lot of responsibility. You know, so the players are aware, you know, that they haven't played as well as they can do, and as well as they showed in pre-season at times as well. So, you know, they're waiting for it to click, but, you know, to make it click, you have to go, first of all, run hard, you know, work hard, and play as a team, as a collective, and, you know, that's the number one aim.
Last one for me, as far as this week in Boston, and how do they look to you? And
yeah, they've had 2 home games, you know, the opposite to us. You know, drew 1 and won 1. You know, it looked a tight game last week against DC. You know, I watched the Minnesota game out of interest because they were our last pre-season matchup as well. So, you know, interesting how they played. You know, they've got some really good players within their team as well. Good structure. But again, for me, it's about concentrating on what we do. If we turn up and play well, then there's not many teams that can beat us here.
Kim?
You mentioned that 6 out of 10 number and how individual performances just haven't been there through the first 2 matches this season. How do you feel like the guys in the locker room kind of received that, and how do you feel like they've taken, maybe more accountability of their personal performances in training this week?
Yeah, no, they took it on board. Listen, I don't have to tell them. They can go home and they look in the mirror every morning, and that tells them enough. Very rarely, and I was a player myself, so I have empathy with them. But I also know that after every game, when you put your head on the pillow, you start thinking about your own performance and how you played in that game. And there'll be a lot of them that know that they could have done better for long periods in the game and know what they have to improve on. But it's 2 games in the season, 2 games on the road as well. So we're at home. There's no excuses, and we need to go and perform.
Jorge?
After review, do you feel like are you open to giving other chances of the guys in the midfield to change something up?
If players have only give 6 out of 10 performances, then it doesn't have to be midfielders that I can change. I can change anyone. If you look at it, if players are giving you 6 out of 10 performances and not more and less in some cases, then there's a number of positions that I can change. And you find that players during the week in training will more often than not play themselves out of a team rather than in a team. We want the standards to be high in training so that the players are playing themselves into the team. But yeah, I mean, probably, after 2 games, you're probably sitting in your 3rd game knowing what probably the spine and your 7 or 8 of your team's going to be. I don't think we're there yet because of the performance levels.
And when it comes to Morrison, do you feel like he's battling for either more minutes or a starting position?
Morrison Agyemang?
Yeah.
Yeah, he came on last week and did well. Admittedly, it wasn't a high bar that was set, but he came on and did well. And that's all you can ask, and he's trained well this week. But in terms of decision-making, where we go with the lineup, you'll find out on Saturday.
Bridget?
Hi, Coach.
Hi.
Privet had a kind of a tough game last week. How has he bounced back in the practices this week?
Andrew Privet made a mistake for the 3rd goal. There was plenty of mistakes made elsewhere as well, but because he was the last line of defence that cost a goal, unfortunately for him, that it magnifies it a little bit. But we watched the 12.5 minutes back, because that was the game last week. Pretty much 3-0 down. It's very hard against players like Peck and Pansel and Klaus to open up. I nearly called him Santa Claus then, but to open up. If we go chasing the game, then you can get done 4 or 5. So mistakes happen in games. I probably took him off simply because I felt that it affected him. And I didn't want him to go through the second half having been affected, and it also given the opportunity to give Morrison some minutes as well. So, he's trained this week. I'll have a chat with him tomorrow and see where he's at as well, and see where we are from there.
And Westwood was a little under the weather last week, so that's why he didn't start. How's he doing this week?
Yeah, I mean, he sounded like he'd had too many cigarettes, but he assures me he doesn't smoke. But yeah, he's better, much better. He wasn't well last week at all. He wanted to play, but I took the decision out of his hands because he just wasn't great. But he's right this week and available for selection in my eyes and his eyes this week.
Thank you.
We'll go to Carol.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Dean, am I off to the side? You're looking over.
I am, Carol, yeah. To you, to me. You won't know that's an English comedy act.
Okay. When you have so many guys with 6 out of 10s, do you look at yourself and say maybe you weren't connecting the dots like?
I always look at myself, Carol. I'm the head coach, so I pick the team that goes out there, and I work with them all week, train them all week. Yeah, I haven't done anything too different to what we've done all pre-season. You know, I'm probably 700 games or so as a coach, so you know, I have to look at myself first and foremost, and I always do. But the be-all and end-all is that we've made too many mistakes in the games, individually. You couldn't say there's been one thing that a team's tried to do against us in both games. Counter-attacks, we've been stung, where we've found players out of position at times and isolated players that we didn't want to be isolated. You know, so naturally when you have that, then you have chances against you.
I just didn't know if you thought there might have been a disconnect with what you guys were trying to implement in the preseason, and maybe it was too much, or it wasn't hitting, or just, you know, fluky.
No, I mean the pre-season games were good. I was happy where we were. What I saw against Minnesota was good, and you know, we were ready for that first game, but we just didn't perform. And you know, mistakes will happen in most games. Well, in every game. It's always what you do next, and you know, unfortunately, we've been punished for quite a few of the mistakes that we've made.
About Morrison, I think I didn't realize he was 6'4" because he's so wide. He's a physical guy. You know, how do you guys take advantage of that kind of gift, I guess?
Yeah, no, he's a physical specimen for sure. He's one that, you know, our recruitment team had looked at and brought him to the table for us to look at, and we liked what we saw. He's spent half a season with the Legacy and did well there. You know, and he's really done well in pre-season as well. And you know, we knew that was going to be a position that, you know, we needed to strengthen. Adilson leaving, and it was interesting listening to Zoran talk on Monday, and I think Zoran spoke. This league makes it really, really difficult. You know, you sell an $8 million player, you can't buy an $8 million player to replace. You know. And we brought in, obviously, Morrison, knowing that Adilson was going, but we also knew we needed another one as well, and you know, brought in Henry. So yeah, I'm pleased with the players that we've got. It's unfortunate that Henry got injured, and you know, I need players to keep others on their toes. You know, and that's what having 4 good centre backs. Plus Andrew Johnson, who's training really well with us now as well, the draft pick. I think that's really important for the club.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you.
We'll go to Steve.
Hello, Dean.
Hi, Steve.
Hi. And about Andrew, I mean, he's a professional. During that 5-game losing streak last year, there was, you know, he had a similar type mistake in one of those games. And stuff. How did you see him? He rebounded from that. The whole team did. You know, to go on a 9-game winning streak. Do you see that coming back? You know, this one too. He's a professional now. He understands. You know, there's consequences and things like that, but you can earn your way back.
Yeah, to be honest, Steve. I mean, you know, we're talking a lot about Andrew Privet today, and he's not top of my list to be talking about, if I'm honest. You know, he's a centre-back who had a fantastic first season with me, did well for, you know, a lot of games last season, came out of the team when Tim and Adilson were doing really well last year. We're 2 games in, you know, and I do feel that we've isolated our centre-backs a little bit too much in the first couple of games, and that's been positional a little bit, and, you know, we've spoken about that. So, you know, for me, I'm not looking at Andrew Privet and thinking, do I have to build him up from something? He's made a mistake and it cost a goal. Somebody told me that Adilson made a mistake similar to that. I think Klaus scored similar to that as well. So, you know, it happens, and good players come through that.
Yeah, no one who's played the game hasn't made a mistake. And regarding to the positioning, has that been more on the wing backs getting too far up at the same time, or is it, you know, also in midfield?
It's a bit of both. I think we've been a bit too open on the ball. I think we've our rest defence positions haven't been as good as what they were last season to stop counter-attacks at source. And because of that, we've conceded some chances and goals. So, yeah, that's been the disappointment so far this season.
Do you need better pressure from the athletes in proximity to where the ball is lost to put better pressure on to limit that?
Yeah, I mean, one of our styles of play will be if we lose the ball, then counter press quickly. If we don't win it quickly, then we get back into our shape and make it difficult for the opposition. You know, you look at the top teams out there now. There's not many teams that are going full out pressing now. They're more mid-block teams and allowing their team to get back in shape and numbers and making it difficult. But you look at the goals that we conceded last week. We had good numbers back behind the ball. We just didn't get pressure to the ball, and that was the biggest thing.
And in regarding to training, when you're looking to see who's going to be in your first 11 for match day, what are the aspects you look for as far as aggression, chemistry with the others, and other things like that?
Number one is attitude. Number two is application. And number three is body language. I know enough about the players. I know what their strengths, what their weaknesses are. I've worked with them a long time. There'll be some new players that I'm still learning a little bit about. But they're the three main things: attitude, application, body language. And if them three are ticking the boxes, then I'm happy.
Great. Thank you very much. See you on Saturday.
Thank you. Cheers, Steve.
Next we'll go to Will.
Hi there, Dean. I appreciated the Chuckle Brothers reference.
You got the Chuckle Brothers to you? To me.
You mentioned the fixture list and being back at home this weekend, and maybe a chance to be a bit more proactive with the play. Within that, will you be looking to increase the share of possession at all, or is that not really a big concern at this stage of the season?
I'm not a massive concern of mine. A massive concern of mine is creating big chances and not giving away big chances. That's the be all and end all, whether you've got good possession or bad possession. The be all and end all is the 2 penalty boxes, and that's where you've got to be better than the opposition. And we see that all the time. We saw Arsenal win the other night at Brighton, 1-0. You know, and I think at half time their XG was 0.01. You know, but they're still 1-0 up. So the biggest part in all games is the 2 penalty boxes, and being better than the opposition in them 2 penalty boxes. We would love to have 60-70% of possession, because that shows a level of control, and that's what we'll be trying to gain. But we're not going to go chasing the ball in areas that can leave us open just to get possession back. There's other ways that you can go and get the ball back.
Okay, and just on that, has that been the biggest problem you've seen in the first 2 games? Those 2 boxes, individual moments, and
no, the biggest problems we've had is we've been caught on too many counter attacks. So we've turned the ball over, and we haven't been in good positions rest defence. And that's caused us problems in the first 2 games.
Great, thanks.
Cheers, thank you.
Hey, Dean, one of the big mantras you had when you came to the club was togetherness. A little under fire here with 1 goal, 1 point out of 2 games. How's the togetherness been? How's the team manifested that? Are they living up to your expectations of staying together in this kind of rocky start?
Yeah, no, the boys are still together. It's 2 games. If it was 10 games, then I'd be a little bit worried if our performance levels hadn't improved. But it's 2 away games where, and I think I've showed you before, I don't get too high when we win, and I certainly won't get too low when we get beat. What I will make sure is that the lads are aware of the deficiencies and how we improve. And no, there's a good group in there.
In terms of when it comes down to it, you said Andrew's not highest on your list, and taking the ball away and being in position probably a little bit higher. Does there get a sense with the players out there that maybe there's too much thought happening and they're not playing as instinctively as they want to because of what has happened in the 180 minutes you guys have played? You've talked a lot about wanting to, have players play free in that sense.
Yeah, but in terms of a structure of how we play as well, I like the players to feel a little bit of freedom to play in the final third of the pitch. Try things in the final third of the pitch that the defenders don't expect, but will also, give them some patterns where we feel that we can hurt the opposition as well. So listen, the 2 games haven't gone ideally, but if we don't concede the first goal against LA Galaxy, then the game's different. If we don't concede the second goal, because they get a goal kick when we should have a corner, that could change the whole game. And that moments in football can change very quickly. So I'm disappointed with the 2 games, but I'm not ready to slip my wrists by any means.
We'll wrap up with Danielle.
Small sample size still with just 2, but are you having more of a focus on a faster start just based on the way these last 2 games began with you guys trying to be the aggressor and getting the front foot? Is that something that you guys have been emphasizing at all?
Yeah, no, definitely. We want a fast start. It's weird. I thought we had a really decent start last week at Galaxy, and then they break and score. And sometimes again that can happen. But yeah, we want a quick start. Especially at home with our fans behind us. Like I said when I first came here, bums out the seats, get them excited, keep them entertained, and that's something that the onus is on us to do.